So, hi everybody. So my name is Peter Parnes, and I'm a professor in pervasive and mobile computing. I will give you an introduction to ChatGPT, a bit about its technology, etc. And I've been sort of diving into what we can do with ChatGPT, and this all started with a bit of I was invited to write a bit of a blog text to help some undergraduate teachers around this. And then this really grew and became a lot of interest, and I got a lot of questions around ChatGPT. So if you want to follow along in this presentation, there's a link there with the bit.ly link that takes you directly to the presentation. And also on my blog, there's a lot of other texts regarding ChatGPT and how we can use it. So I will be doing this in English, as you can hear, but the slides will be in Swedish. And afterwards, if you want to ask any questions, you're more than welcome to do so in Swedish. So today, I'm going to do or give you an introduction to AI and ChatGPT. Welcome. How does ChatGPT work? So what differentiates ChatGPT from all other AI chat engines, and sort of why has it become so popular? I'm going to talk about how it can help us with teaching and learning, both from a student perspective and a teacher perspective. I'm going to talk a bit about its limitations, some legal aspects, go into very little regarding research, because I found it was I didn't really have time to dive into both areas. I'll come back to that in a later seminar during the spring. So this will mainly be on teaching today, but these two areas are very overlapping. And then I will dive into the area of cheating. That's so much of the press around ChatGPT when it was launched was about now all students can cheat, they can do all the assignments, and I'm going to share some thoughts about that. And then also some thoughts about money, integrations, and also looking forward at LTU. I'll be speaking about 45, 50 minutes perhaps, and then you'll be able to ask questions, and I'll be stay around until 3 o'clock if you want to stay on and just openly discuss things, both for people online and locally here in the room. So what is ChatGPT? Well, first of all, it's a research prototype. It's not a product. It's not like anything that's ready. It was released by a company called OpenAI on exactly 2 months ago, end of November, last day of November. And it's so far, it's been the internet service that has grown the fastest ever on the internet. So they reached 1 million users in a couple of days. Just to compare, Instagram took about 1 year to reach 1 million users. So it's been very, very, very popular. OpenAI has developed a number of research prototypes, products regarding what's called generative AI, and I'll come back to what that is in a moment. And that is applications where you can generate new content through AI. So it can be text, but also pictures and programming and other tools. So ChatGPT is an AI model developed to generate text in a conversational fashion. That is, that we can ask it questions and then ask it follow-up questions and dive into what is already have said, and it learns from the context. When I say learn from context, it's important to remember that it only learns within this conversation. There's no sharing. So for instance, if Yusuf here asks questions, I can't see his questions. The things that's presented to Yusuf doesn't spill over to my conversation. So it's isolated to me. And I'll come back to this in a moment. So the machine learning model is a so-called transformer-based model. And in essence, that means that ChatGPT is not an encyclopedia with a lot of knowledge. It's an application that tries to statistically gauge what is the most, which word should I present the next based on probability. So it looks on the conversation, the context, and then generates a word that it thinks is the most suitable in this particular situation. That means that it doesn't really have any knowledge about what is fact and it's not fact. It's just based on a lot of knowledge out there, and it can easily fabricate new things. So one example of this is, I'm translating here, and this is, how do we grow horse eggs? And it happily answers that. So we need to have 2 horses here, and well, you see it in Swedish here, and when it produces a child horse, then it can start laying eggs, etc., which is a bit creative. But it's not sort of that ChatGPT here thinks that it sort of think, oh, this is fiction or this is reality. To ChatGPT, this is sort of reality. It just takes out the word that it thinks is the most plausible coming next, or even parts of words. So you have to keep that in mind, that ChatGPT is very good at inventing new things. So what can we do with ChatGPT? Well, answer questions. That is sort of the simple thing. You go in there, you ask a question, you get one answer. But more advanced things is that you can discuss the answer. You can ask it to elaborate. You can ask it to give you a different answer than it already gave you. So you can sort of dive into, if you have like trying to learn algorithms, then you can, it sort of gives you an overview explanation of the algorithm. Then there might be a word you don't understand. Then you can ask about that word. And even you can ask it to compare things. So what about if I compare this algorithm to that algorithm? Or I want to compare the industrial evolution in UK versus Sweden, and then we'll give you a nice comparison between what happened in Sweden and what happened in Great Britain. It can conclude or abbreviate texts. So I did this yesterday and today. Also, I forgot to mention that I use ChatGPT a lot. It helps me with my daily work a lot. I use it for lectures, presentations, setting up, writing texts, etc. You can have it to help you give arguments. So if, for instance, if you having a discussion, you're discussing a new business model, and this is a real live case. So I actually had an email conversation here with another person at that university regarding business models for a certain area. And she said a few things, I said a few things, and I thought, well, let's ask ChatGPT, does it have even more suggestions in this particular case? And yes, it did. And it was a few of them were, it wasn't really good, but a few were quite good. And we incorporated that into the text. So it sort of helped me sort of get my new arguments. I know we have several programmers here in the audience, and of course, ChatGPT can help us a lot with that. Explaining software. It's really, really good at that. So give it a small snippet of code, ask it sort of, what does this code do? And it will give you a very nice explanation. You can ask it to comment your code. You can even ask it to create new code. So I've been doing this on a sort of experimental level with creating code for computer games, and it's very, very good at that. It gives you like an embryo of text, and then you can ask it sort of dive into, so I want to add that functionality, or you might see in the program, oh, that doesn't really work. Or even it will tell you that it's at a certain limitation. And then you can ask it sort of elaborate on that, give him a new program. Or like, what if I want to do this, this, and this? And it will sort of continue. And you can sort of use that to learn and develop your software. You can also use it to find bugs in your software. It's really good at that. Find out this code doesn't work. Put it in there, and you can even say, so why doesn't it work? You don't even have to specify what doesn't work. It will sort of try to analyze the text and then conclude sort of, oh, here's a bug, and it will sort of tell you what the bug is. So on the learning side, so what can it do for our students? Well, obviously, help them understand. So if they don't understand something, they can ask ChatGPT for an explanation of that. They can get very fast answers, and I'll come back to a specific scenario regarding that in a moment that John Hopkins did just a few weeks ago. A third bullet there is something I think many here recognize, and that is getting started with assignments. I sometimes get very frustrated. I have to write something, and I don't really know how to attack it. I don't know how to write the text. And over the years, I've developed certain methods to help me with this, but still it can be very frustrating. And I guess this goes for some of you as well. I think at least Marcus is nodding here. And here you can ask ChatGPT to sort of ask, like, write me a text. So just not necessarily that you want to use this for cheating or just copy pasting, but just sort of, I have this assignment, write a sort of introduction, help me get started. And you will get a text that you can then use to write your assignment. Is this cheating? It's not, or not cheating? We'll come back to that later on. Use it for inspiration, just give you sort of, as I said, arguments and develop thinking regarding various texts. You can also use it if you feel depressed. Ask it to write some nice text about yourself. Or if you want to give it to somebody else, write a nice poem about Pernilla, for instance, when I'm emailing with her. She can do that. It's very good with that. It's not very good at writing poem, rim. What's that in English? Rhyme, of course. No, it can write limericks, but not rhymes. So, but yeah, so I'll come back to the sort of more about the teaching in a moment. So this is another example. This is a quite advanced question. So we had this discussion between our teachers about 2 weeks ago, computer science teachers here at the university. We were about 15 persons there, and we were discussing how to present report writing. So what would you present in the first year, and like at the second year and the third year? And we weren't really in an agreement on sort of, well, how would you structure that? So I asked ChatGPT just for fun to see, so what would sort of progression on learning how to write a report look like on university level? And they actually gave me a very good suggestion here over like 5 years. So what to do in the first year, second year, third year, etc. And then I asked it sort of, how would I examine this on each level? So what would I ask? What knowledge should I look for at year 1, year 2, year 3, etc. This was really, really helpful for us or at least for me in this discussion. Then I can continue with this, and I could ask it sort of, I want a rubric. So what is the student supposed to know at these different levels? And for those that are teachers here that have done this, this is quite tricky. This takes a lot of time and thinking. I mean, do you agree, Josef? Yeah. It's not trivial to do this. And here I got a suggestion sort of within like 10 seconds. I had the answer that could help me as a teacher move along and then sort of use this with my students. And then it suggests, at one point, it suggested how I would examine this. And one would be an interview. So I would interview the students about this sort of knowledge. And then I would say, so how would I structure the interview? And then it gives me sort of, here, 6 bullet points on how to structure the interview. And if you are an inexperienced teacher or an experienced teacher, I think this can be very, very valuable in helping you as a teacher. So a few words on AI and going in a bit sort of a few slides on going below the surface of ChatGPT. So AI on a very sort of top level is methods and algorithms and software to help us use computers to solve problems that humans solve. So, I mean, that's a very, very broad definition of AI. On the other hand, we have something called machine learning, and that is algorithms and software that can help computers learn from real life or from real data or data in general. So before we dive into how ChatGPT actually works, I just want to mention the word generative AI. And when we have AI, we can sort of divide it into many different groups, and one of them is generative AI, and that is when we have an AI that helps us create new things, and that is what we're talking about here today. We also have different classifications where you sort of try to gather information about existing data, get sort of what is a nice curve connected to certain data, etc. But here today we're talking about generative AI, and here are these 2 photos, and in there is you might guess why I didn't include them. They're obviously not real. They are generative AI. So these are photos generated by an AI on my computer, my office computer here, and there's just a small snippet here about sort of ChatGPT describing generative AI. But these are just sort of the quality of the tools today is that we can actually use them sort of for production. So how does ChatGPT actually work? And why is ChatGPT so much better than other AI chat engines that we've seen so far? Well, first of all, OpenAI, the company behind ChatGPT, they started off with a huge database or machine learning model, AI model, that was sort of trained on a lot of data before. They haven't shared all the details on how much data it was trained on, how big the model is, etc. So this is sort of a condensation of what they've said in public papers there. So there's a lot of details here that if you're really interested, want to read more about. So to be able to train this, they started off with actually having humans write a lot of questions. So this says humans sitting there typing in questions like explain a machine learning to me like a 6-year-old, as in this example here. And then when they've gathered these questions, they also sat down and started writing a lot of answers to these questions. So basically quite the opposite to machine learning here. It's like this is a lot of human powered work. I saw a number that they had about 15,000 questions at this sort of first stage. And this was then used to enhance the existing model that they already had since before. And then in step 2, when they trained the model to produce the type of answers they wanted to see, they then asked the beta ChatGPT to produce new answers there. And they produced 4 to 9 answers to each question. And then a human, once again, a lot of humans here, got to sit down and take these answers and say, well, this is the best one and this is the worst one, and sort of classify all of them in order. And based on that, they created what was sort of a reward model. And this is reward-based machine learning. And that is exemplified in this example. So this is a small demo I've been showing for many years. If it works, YouTube, load, there we go. No. And here we see a ball rolling on a flat surface, and it's trying to reach the blue cube, as you can see. And the thing here is that I haven't told I haven't programmed the goal. I haven't told it that you should reach the blue ball. What I've done instead is that I've given the AI brain here, I give it a reward and I give it punishments. So I give it a reward of 0.1 if it moves closer to the cube, and 1.0 in reward if it reaches the cube. And then a minus 0.1 if it moves away from the cube, and -1 if it actually goes over the edge here. And then it knows where it is, XY coordinates in there, and it can push the ball. So it can like have a force on the ball. But I've never really, as I said, I've never given it the goal there. And here it's sort of, initially, when you do this the first time, you start this, then it will it won't work. It sort of will just boom, run over the corner. And it will do this tens of thousands of times before it gets to a brain that actually works. And that is sort of by basically trial and error, trying to achieve as high a score as possible. So coming back to the third step in ChatGPT then. So now we have developed a reward model. That is, we have like a computer program that can tell us or tell the computer itself if an answer is good or bad. So it's based on the things that they did in step 2, where humans wrote the answers, but now it's all automated. And when it's automated, you can do this very, very much quicker. So they can then train this very, very much. And then you get a feedback to sort of the reward model, if it's good or bad, and it sort of then evolves and to try to give the best answer and trying to find the best answers from ChatGPT. So I hope that was understandable, at least for a bit. But the difference here is in the first step, there's no humans involved, while in step 1 and step 2, there were humans involved. And we'll come back to the implications of that now. So this is really machine learning done together with or by humans. Sort of a bit of a paradox here. So we're talking about machines learning, but humans are putting in a lot of manpower into this. And that's one of the keys to why ChatGPT is actually successful and good. But it also means that we get in the sort of human values, ethics, etc. The kind of things that's a bit hard to program and say sort of what is good, what is bad there. And we get that by this sort of humans writing the answers. We also get in writing styles. So what is a good answer? And one of the effects we see of this is that as everybody here that has tried ChatGPT has seen that it can be quite talkative. It sort of gives you quite a lot of text there. It's never really to the point and just says yes, no. It's sort of a lot of text. And that comes back to sort of what these humans then wrote, because when they wrote the answers, they try to be sort of elaborate and write good language, etc. In there. So that's an effect that when they trained OpenAI or ChatGPT from the beginning, they really didn't think about that effect. So we probably will see more about that in the future. Yeah, I'll skip the rest there. So just so leave the technical side for a bit. So how can then ChatGPT help us with learning? So how can it help the student? So as I said a moment ago, it can explain new things to us, and it can explain them over and over again. It's like a teacher that never gets tired. I don't know, I've been a teacher here for quite many years at LTU, and sometimes you get tired of answering the same question for the 77th time. And here you have a sort of a teacher assistant that doesn't get tired. It can answer the same question over and over again. And it's very easy to answer follow-up questions. But it's also something that's available all the time. So I can get fast answers, but I can also get them 24/7, 24 hours a day, anytime I need. So if I'm sitting there as a student studying to a test, then the teacher is available at 4 a.m. in the morning. As I said before, it can help us get started with writing assignments. It can abbreviate text for us, but also verify that I've actually understood something. So I had a student that I discussed sort of that has been using ChatGPT, and she was using it to understand algorithms in graphics. And she thought she sort of understood it, but she wasn't certain. So she asked ChatGPT sort of to explain it to her again. And that's sort of, this is not cheating, it's sort of verification. So there she got an explanation and said, well, yeah, that's the same thing, same understanding I had in my head. And then she asked it about something else. And there she got an answer that she didn't agree with. And then they got her sort of thinking sort of, is this correct? Is ChatGPT doing the right thing or wrong thing? And in the end, she concluded that ChatGPT was wrong. And that's what I think is a great opportunity for learning there. But it also shows that you have to be careful with what ChatGPT gives us. You can also create your own assignments. You want to just give me a quiz on the subject that I'm taking right now. I'm taking gender equality. So give me 20 questions on the IT industry and gender equality. So how can it write or help the teacher? So help with planning and organization. I think that is one of the key things here. They sort of help you plan your lectures, help you plan how to organize it. So you can ask it sort of, tell it, I'm giving a lecture on gender equality. So how would I start it? Which areas should I cover? Which order should I cover them in? Very much the things that we already do as teachers, but here you might get sort of a head start in doing that. It's like a tool for helping us with that. Just as for the students, we can have it to give us new assignments for the students. You can have it help us write texts that it sort of, write tests that we want to have in our lectures, give to students, assignments, etc. Write a context around assignments. And also the final one, or the fourth one is answer questions from the students. Sometimes you actually get questions that you don't understand. I don't know how many teachers actually admit that, but I can do. I sometimes get questions I don't understand. Sandeep agrees with me back there. Anyhow, so here you can use ChatGPT to give you the answer to give to the students, so you doesn't look too stupid as a teacher. The fifth one, though, is a more, I think, well, powerful or both dangerous thing, and that is that help you write a critique on student work. So you give it sort of, these are the things, the various levels or things that I want to see in the text, and then I ask ChatGPT to look for that and write feedback to the students. And I'm very surprised that in most cases, it does a very good job. And you give more text that you can give to the student as a feedback than I would usually write as a teacher. So you do sort of assessment and feedback to the student at the sort of more elaborate level. Obviously, you need to read the answers and read the student text initially to verify that it is true. But the student here would then get more texts and more feedback based on your own ideas on what should be in there. You probably can't read this. I can hardly read this at this resolution, but here is just another example of writing a course plan. So here I ask you to write a course plan on advanced level at Luleå, tekniska universitet for a course about dynamic web systems. The teacher is Professor Peter Parnes, and it gave me here the course goals, the course content, the requirements, course literature. And a fun thing here, you probably can't see this, but he actually invented a book that I apparently wrote here. Dynamic Web Systems by Professor Peter Parnes, recommended reading book. That's nice. So I didn't write it though. But I really agree with the subjects here, because it didn't really match the format we have at LTU. So I asked it sort of, well, write it, but include these headings, sort of the standardized headings we have at our university. And then it sort of did the same thing and gave me something better. It's not perfect. I mean, Yusuf here being the program manager, he wouldn't approve of that. But if I was there sitting and writing a new course plan, this would be a very good help for me to get started. And it would save me a lot of time just sort of starting with this text. And then I asked it sort of, what is the teaching goals for this course? And it gave me 5 of those that was quite good and I could sort of elaborate on. Here's another example on gender equality in IT companies. It gave me here sort of a suggestion on if I had a home assignment in the subject where they couldn't use ChatGPT to solve the assignment. And it then gave me like a number of suggestions here, like a written exam, case study, a verbal presentation, and discussion questions. And then I asked it, how would I sort of judge their knowledge? So that they know a little, or they know a medium, or a lot, etc. Like to help me do the grading here. And that is sort of, what should I look for in their knowledge? Once again, I think that's very helpful. ChatGPT in the classroom. So can we use ChatGPT sort of with all our students in the classroom? This is an experiment done at the Johns Hopkins Institute in the US. They were giving a course in computer security on very advanced levels level. It was a mix of graduate students, master students, etc. They were taking a 5-day intensive course in computer security. During this course, the teacher said that he encouraged the students to use ChatGPT all the time. So they would have like a tab open on their computer with ChatGPT. For every student would have this open. And when they had questions or they didn't follow or something, they would ask ChatGPT. The teacher admits he was very skeptical to this, but he wanted to do the experiment. Something that that surprised him, or that he sort of concluded from this, was that all the so-called stupid questions disappeared. There aren't no stupid questions, but there are questions typically that show that the students haven't perhaps prepared, they have been thinking about something else, I mentioned this 5 minutes ago, etc. All of those sort of basic questions disappeared. The students didn't ask them anymore because they asked them to ChatGPT instead. And the second effect of this, that they could get very, very quick answers back, was that they got a more intensive discussion. So the students engaged in the discussion in the classroom more. Because if they didn't understand something, then the student would feel stupid. They didn't want to interrupt and ask, and then they would basically surrender. They wouldn't engage in the discussion. But here, they got an answer, and they could then from that answer be part of the discussion and continue being part. So they got an answer then within sort of 5 to 15 seconds while the discussion was still sort of valid. Because sometimes we sit down and we don't understand something, we go out on Google, we find an article, we start reading something and it points to another article and we start looking. And then when we actually understand what the teacher or some other person in the classroom were talking about, the discussion has moved on. It's sort of too late to engage. But here it's sort of, the speed was one of the key elements. And here it also means that the students don't need to show that they don't understand. So they don't have to feel stupid in the classroom. And once again, I think that's a very valuable thing. And this leads also to sort of a kind of equality in learning, where everybody can participate and everybody can get help when they need it. And I think that's a very important thing, especially perhaps if we go further down in learning, sort of undergraduate or compulsory school learning, etc. So where the pupils can get sort of help anytime, anywhere. Something to think about when using ChatGPT is that you have to think about how you write the questions. In Google, you typically don't think very much about sort of what you want to search for. You type in a word or 2 or 3 or 4 words, etc., and you get like a number of hits, and then you start sort of looking at, well, this third one here looks interesting. I'll click on that one and look, and I get sort of perhaps a highlight underneath the link there. And then when I go into the page, I can't even find the highlight in the text because there's so much text. So with ChatGPT, we can ask very sort of broad questions and we get broad answers back. But the more specific we are with the context, the background, and how we word our questions, we also get more specific questions back. So it's a bit of a training on how to use this tool. So some of the limitations. So I've been very positive towards ChatGPT right now, but it also has a lot of limitations. And one of them, or the biggest one, is that it doesn't have any knowledge of sort of what is fact. It has just learned from a tremendous amount of data on the internet, Wikipedia, news, web pages, etc. It's just sort of a big mishmash of texts, and it's built up a model of that to generate the next most plausible word. It doesn't know if it's sort of true or not too true. And if it doesn't have specific knowledge or in its model for a specific word, then it will just create that word. The second is that the data is, it's all of 2020 until early 2021 something, and it doesn't know anything after that. There's been a lot of articles about that it sort of goes out and fetches data, etc., but that's all fake. It can't. It doesn't have any internet connection in that sense. It doesn't know mathematics. It's very, very bad at calculations. It can explain mathematics. It's great at sort of explaining algorithms, but it doesn't have the basic fundamental concepts of sort of what is 2 plus 2. It doesn't understand that. And it's very bad at sort of logical questions. For instance, 2 persons are driving down the road. It takes them 10 minutes to reach their destination. How long does it take 4 persons to ride in the same car to the same destination? Sometimes you get the answer half the time, sometimes you get same time, and sometimes it takes double the time. but it's sort of the same same right. It doesn't sort of understand this. But as I said, it's very good at explaining math. And then finally, one of the perhaps the biggest limitations here is that it's humans that have been involved in creating this, and humans have their own valuations of the world, sort of what is right and wrong, and this is connected back to our own culture. In this case here, it's a US company that's behind this, but it just sort of a week ago popped up an article that there is digging here, and it turned out that most of the questions and answers have been written by people in Kenya because they were much cheaper. They only paid them about $2 per hour to do this, compared to having computer scientists in the US doing it for much, much more per hour. So that might also influence the data in there. So I think that's one of the major challenges in the future. How do we have AI engines and brains like this that are sort of agnostic to everything? How can it be neutral to everything in the world without having sort of any preferences when it comes to religion, technology, persons, languages, etc.? So that was one of the sort of limitations with ChatGPT. And then we have a number of legal limitations with ChatGPT, and that is, first of all, OpenAI says that you have to be an adult to use it. Well, that's perhaps not a big problem for us here at university, but if you want to use it at lower levels with your kids, etc., then that might formally be a problem. But perhaps the second is worse, and that is that it breaks totally our Swedish laws or European laws. So we can't, from a GDPR perspective, and in Sweden, the corresponding law is dataskyddsförordningen. This service doesn't comply with that. We're not basically allowed to use this service. And we cannot also write any agreements to use this service as it looks right now. Because one of the requirements through GDPR is that we should be able to ask them to forget all the data that I have given them. Forget about me. Forget all the data I've sort of given to OpenAI. Because OpenAI openly say that everything you send to OpenAI will be saved for future research. And this, I didn't mention that before, but earlier data from earlier chat engines from OpenAI, those questions have been used to train ChatGPT there. So so from that perspective, we cannot use this service. But then again, we do this for many different services here at LTU and in the university world. We are very good at using these tools without any agreements. Language. So ChatGPT can speak basically all languages in the world. And it's not because it sort of have learned specific languages. It's based on the data that it has learned from. So it happily can translate texts. It can do it like English is typically perfect. Swedish is, I would say, sort of 90% perfect. Sometimes you get sort of a Norwegian word in there or some Danish word that are sort of similar to Swedish words, but it's almost perfect there. You can also ask it to change languages within a conversation. So here's an example. So I started in Swedish and then I asked it to write it in Chinese instead. I had to use Google Translate to verify that. So I guess it actually was correct. So it did a very good translation of that to Chinese. There, so you can there, and also on purpose here you can see is I misspelled one word and it didn't correct me on that. It just understood it as I asked it to write this in Chinese. So it's here, skruv detta på kinesiska, and it doesn't really matter. So you don't have to be sort of careful when you write and talk to it either. So can we use ChatGPT in education? Well, legally, no, we can't. As I said before, we don't have the agreements in place to use it, and as how ChatGPT is structured right now as a service, we won't be able to write such an agreement. Is ChatGPT available right now? Well, I would say yes or no. It's a bit Schrödinger's cat over that one, because the service gets overloaded and sometimes you get thrown out. And This being a research prototype as well, OpenAI hasn't said anything about how long this will be available, if it's going to be free or not. They have indicated that the basic level of the service will be free to use for everybody. But it gets overloaded from time to time, especially in the afternoons. So if you use ChatGPT and it gets overloaded, it says sort of, oh, notify me when it's available again. Just do reload a couple of times, and then you usually get into the service. So for me, this is sort of from a learning perspective, it's a bonus to if it's available or not in the teaching situation. But as a teacher, we have to think about how we use it. Then if we just briefly talk about research, this is very much overlapping with when we use it for teaching. So here we have, I mean, it can, we as researchers, we read quite a lot, and it sort of can help us condense text. Give me sort of what is the highlights in this paper. It can help us with, if you work with transcribation, for instance, minutes. I had a friend, he actually produced a live tool to record the audio in a meeting. Then he used a service called Whisper to then take the audio, produce text from that, and then he used ChatGPT to condense that text into minutes, to like real meeting minutes. And then he got a text that actually works out of that. So that's a lot of text analysis, so to gather the important parts in a text. Create abstracts for our papers, write a text in a certain style. This is quite interesting. So you can take your text and you can say, make it more formal. And this, if you're perhaps not used to writing like in paper style, or you want to expand the texts and write it like a very polite email to somebody, you can ask ChatGPT to do that for you. And then, as I said before, give proposals to arguments when you're trying to find positive or negative things about what you're writing about. And sometimes it can help you with references, but here you have to be really careful, because it's very good at inventing references. I remember like early December, I asked it for references in a certain case, and it gave me very good references. I recognized the authors. And then there was a sort of this a paper there by Chen and Chen. And I said, I haven't seen that one, but the title sounded very interesting. So I looked it up, and nope, that paper didn't exist, but the reference looked very interesting and promising. But so you have to be careful with that one. There's a lot of other services regarding AI and research, so I just provided a list here so you can dive into afterwards if you are interested. Here is another example. Kommunikation och varumärke, our marketing division here, did an experiment last week. Can we use ChatGPT to write news articles? And here is a fake interview with ChatGPT about ChatGPT as if it was written by me. But it was actually William Laumann here that works as a web editor at LTU that did this work. I think this is something we could publish straight off. It's sort of, it works. So a few words about cheating. As I said initially, this was one of the biggest news parts regarding ChatGPT when it was released. So can students cheat using ChatGPT? Yes. Almost all assignments we give them today can be solved, partially or in full, with ChatGPT. I tried it on programming assignments in earlier years, gave splendid answers. Some of them was perhaps too complicated. It gave you sort of bad feedback there, but it solved the problems, answered questions. I used it, looking at Lennart here, I used it in BEC 2, for instance, in the various assignments we had there. It was excellent answers. Excellent. I would help me a lot when I took that course there. So, but what is cheating here? Well, in Swedish, it's vilseledande examination. I don't know what the official word is in English there, but it's the student isn't allowed to say that they've basically done something themselves when they've taken text or used some tool somewhere else. So on a sort of on a theoretical level, then it's it's quite clear. They're not allowed to fool us by taking ChatGPT output and saying that they've done it themselves. But what if a student say that I have used ChatGPT to help me do this assignment? And it writes that openly. It says that. And then you might say, well, it should be individual work. But where's the limit here? So if I have a problem with an assignment in high school or högskolepedagogik, and I go to Marcus and I discuss this with Marcus, and then he helps me. He tells me, hey, look at this paper, read this text. That's not cheating, right? He helps me. But if I do the same thing with ChatGPT, is that cheating? So where is the sort of limit? Stanford they were very early on releasing a text on how to use this, and there we were suggested a percentage. They said sort of, well, 75% of the work has to be original, have you done by yourself, and 25% can be done via AI tools. But how do you, I think I was supposed to be on a different, whatever. I got lost in my own slides here. But if I then use ChatGPT, I can use it in certain levels when doing this. So I asked ChatGPT to start writing an assignment. I start there and I start writing texts. And then I asked ChatGPT to explain something to me, help me write like 2 sentences about something. Oh, well, I understand that. I might even write that in my own word. And then I asked ChatGPT to help me correct this text, do spell checking on it, like just make it more formal before I hand it in. So how do we then sort of find what is the percentage of using ChatGPT? So it's not that easy to just say that. And then when it comes back to cheating, so the next thing here is, it's actually comes from Marcus here, and I'll take this in Swedish. Ju större konsekvenser ett prov har för en individs liv, desto större är benägenheten att fuska. The more important a test is, the more I am willing to cheat. So people pay in Sweden 200,000 kronor to get a 2.0 on högskoleprovet. That's a lot of money. So people are quite motivated to cheat. But there can also be other reasons to cheat. Bad planning. The student haven't planned their time correctly. So they're just running out of time before a deadline. They start too late. I think everybody here knows that this happens all the time. And there it might be in their interest to cut corners a bit, to say sort of, I have to do this on time. And that's cheating, but they still do it. So can we detect the cheating? Well, we have our classical systems, Urkund, original there. Can it detect the text that it's created? No, it cannot, because it looks for that if the text has been copied from another source. In this case, it hasn't. It's original text. It's new text. You can't find that there is no sort of original here. It's just new text that ChatGPT creates every time. Can we detect if an AI have written the text? There's been a lot of writing about this, and there's several tools being sort of promoted. Yes, they can do this. But in my tests, I say, no, they can't. Doesn't matter. I've tried many times. And just yesterday, a new tool was released, GPT-0X, that was supposed to be even better. But it doesn't work, not on my texts, at least. So I give it both ChatGPT texts and my personal texts. And in some cases, they're all written by humans, or in some cases, all written by AI. But the important thing here is that these tools only give us a probability that an AI has written a text. So if Yusuf has cheated here, and I get a sort of a probability, it's like a 72% probability that Yusuf has used ChatGPT to solve this assignment. But Yusuf, he wants to cheat. He doesn't want to acknowledge to have done it, because then he will get a punishment. So he just said, no, I haven't. And I, as a teacher, cannot do anything about that, because I don't have any evidence. When it comes to sort of the classical cheating, copying from your friend or the net, etc., then it's very clear. Well, we have the original here. I can see Yusuf, it's the same text. You have to cheat better, Yusuf. And that's what he's doing right now with ChatGPT. He's cheating better. And we cannot detect that. Then there's also talk about watermarking, that we watermark the text somehow to see that this is AI generated. In China, there's a law saying that everything generated by AI has to have a watermark on it. For pictures, this can be hidden inside a picture. We don't even see the watermarking. You can do like certain magic in there. You can wash it away with tools, but it's sort of easy to hide it away. And if you don't see the watermarking, it's also easier to sort of that it gets through the cheating process, that the students don't know about watermarking. But how do you do watermarking on text? I mean, if you want to add something, there's ways programmatically that you can hide in the fonts or the text encodings that there is sort of generated by AI. But you can very, very easily wash that away. Usually just a simple copy paste from one text, from say a web page to a text tool removes that watermarking. So that wouldn't work either. So today, there is no real sort of solution to this problem. Well, I'm running out of time here, so I'll just skip this. But if you put parts of högskoleprovet through ChatGPT, you get 70% right on the word understanding. And it was just a few days ago, it was said that ChatGPT managed to do the law exam in the US. It got quite bad degree, a C+ there, which was by the sort of lower end of the students in that class, but it did it. Yeah, so I already talked about that. So what does Springer say about this? So the publishers or the research paper publishers. So Springer Nature released a statement on this last week, and one of they basically said very little, but two rules. One being that ChatGPT shouldn't be cited as an author, because that has happened. There's somebody that submitted a paper for review and they put in ChatGPT as a co-author. And they said, well, don't do that. Every co-author has to be able to be responsible for the content. That one's quite obvious. The other is that you have to specify in the paper, in acknowledgements or methods or some other section, that ChatGPT has been sort of part in the process. But they don't say anything about sort of how much it can be part of the process. Can just be said, so I can write, well, I've used ChatGPT to help me write this paper. I guess that's wrong, and that's okay. They also admitted that, or said that they are writing their own detection tools, but they also in the same sentence noticed that it probably won't work, just for the same reasons I just gave you. And I think this would be there, would be a problem in the future. And in the end, they refer back to the researcher's own integrity, that we need to sort of have our integrity and not cheat when doing research. But as we all know, cheating in the research world exists, and also there's a lot of pressure on publishing. There's a lot of sort of this quantity versus quality. Graduate students need to produce. Researchers need to produce. Do you want to hear about sort of 2 minutes about money as well? Yes, okay, because I'm running out of time, but I'll take this anyhow. So ChatGPT is free today. Cost tons of money to run, and I'll come back to that in a moment. Last week or 2 weeks ago, there was sort of the first beta test of the professional version being released. And in that test, it cost $42 per month to use, almost 500 kronor SEK to use, 433 with yesterday's conversion rate. Microsoft has been very, very invested in this. They already, 2019, invested 10 billion SEK in OpenAI, of which half of it was in the form of a supercomputer power. So they built a specific supercomputer just to for OpenAI to use to train GPT-like models there. So it's a computer with 285,000 CPU cores and 10,000 graphic cards. And if you want to build such a machine, it costs a lot of money, and I'll get back to that in a moment. They just announced last week that they will invest about 100 billion SEK in OpenAI for 49% ownership in the company. So they are really, really investing in this area for their own products. There's a other product, similar product called Anthropic, and they only have 7 billion SEK in venture capital, and they are having a closed beta of their product right now. So we will see other products as well. To run ChatGPT, there's no big official announcement on how much it costs to run ChatGPT today, but one estimate I saw was that it's about 1 million SEK per day just in computer resources. So 300 to 400 million kronor per year just to run it as it is today. They are working on creating the next generation GPT, and the big cost here is training of the model. As I said before, Microsoft created a supercomputer just for them to use to train the previous generation. And if we would take that same machine and create it today, just the graphics cards, I calculated with today's costs, would cost about 1.5 billion SEK just to buy the graphics cards that they had in the machine that they built in 2020. So I mean, it's not that everybody can do this. You have to have a lot of investment and a lot of money to be able to create a competitor here. As I said, Microsoft invests heavily in this. Rumors say it's a bit unclear if it sort of comes from Microsoft or just general rumors. But some say that Bing, Microsoft search engine, the Google competitor, will include ChatGPT in March. That's like a month or two away. They will integrate this into Office. And personally, I think when we see this integrated in our daily tools, that's when the real power starts. You sit there, you write your text, and you just get suggestions. You don't have to ask for the suggestions. It will just pop up there, and you just give you things. And for programming, we already have this with the Microsoft tool called Copilot that does this and works tremendously well. I use it all the time when I program, and it helps me a lot. So just finally, what happens at LTU? So I have a small assignment from our faculty boards here, a bit undecided what I'm supposed to do so far, but we're discussing it, or will be discussing it. There will be a seminar in March for TFN, the technical faculty, and I plan to have more workshops and seminars during the spring. And here I encourage you to see, what do you want to see? How do you want to discuss this further on LTU? And one obvious thing is like, how do we actually dive into how we use this with our students? We also have a proposal on doing a MOOC on this being discussed. But I think one of the key points here that we should work on, and I happen to know that our sort of friends at KTH are working on and have a splendid document on code of conduct with rules and proposals for both our students and teachers, how to use these kinds of tools, because we will have a lot of tools like this coming up, and we cannot ignore them. We cannot sort of say, forbid this. We have to think about how they will be incorporated, because the students will use them anyhow. Teachers here at LTU will use them anyhow. I will use them here. Also, if you want to hear me talk about this again, there's a number of presentations coming up, both at KTH, in Stockholm, Technical Museum, etc. And we have a pedagogical fika to discuss this further on Thursday at SRT, here my own department. If there's somebody from the industry listening in, I will be talking downtown next week at Mobilaris Innovation Center about this as well. I also have a number of texts and movies regarding ChatGPT and how it works. There are also a number of other services that you can try out. I don't mean that you should be able to read this, but there's a lot of services just to use AI to help you do text, images, music, everything basically. There's tools to do that. Some are good, some are less good there, but you can still try them out. So to summarize, ChatGPT was released exactly 2 months ago. It has taken the world with basically a storm. So tens of millions daily users use it for work. I've seen studies that certain university groups that up to 87% of the students use ChatGPT to help them do their studying already. So it's basically everybody. Obviously, it differs from place to place. We have to think about here at LTU how we use it, what we say to our students. How do we use it ourselves? How do we share data with ChatGPT? And also, how will we use these types of tools in the future? And I encourage you, if you haven't tried ChatGPT, try it. You will be amazed on how much time it will save you, independently of what work you're doing here at LTU or other places. Yeah, and also we can think about sort of what is the university's role in the future. And I think it comes down to this, and that is sort of that we should support the creative processes. We have to learn the students how to think critically, not just accept everything we do, and in the end, learn them to learn, because there's always something new to learn. And with that, I thank you all for listening. I didn't save any room for questions, and I think we're officially at 2 p.m. So those that want to run away, please do so. Otherwise, I'll stick along here for to answer a few questions. I won't be offended if you leave now. So with that, I'm going to stop the recording and open up for questions.